presentation mode. And here we go. Is that it? What's that little thing right there? Turn on, turn on. Cool. You're not seeing the same stuff I'm seeing on my screen. All right, so. Okay. Thank you for coming. That's very cool. My name is Mark Westwind, and I am a long-term UTC guide. I learned to paddle in like 86, something like that, on a personal paddle. I was involved with the San Francisco ropes course for 12 years. And I was just telling Andrew that I would do the ropes course in the city for a while and drive home through Sausalito. Cloudy and rainy and foggy over there, and I'd drive back and Sausalito would be sunny and everything else. And I would talk to my fellow leaders who were also UTC guides, and I would say, oh, we had a great kayaking trip. I don't do that. So I came over here, volunteered. And so I've been a trip leader and a trainer and just a regular guide. I was trained by Sea Trek, and I've done Sea Trek trips and lots of personal trips and so forth. And over the years, I've learned that there's often a loss of institutional knowledge as program directors come and go and as guides come and go. And I've wanted to really bring my collected knowledge to the guide community. And there's a lot of slides in this, more than perhaps we can get to, but it's also a collection of my knowledge, so I can share it with you guys offline. The purpose today is really to deal with the concept of making you a better guide. Okay, so we're going to talk about an overview of the bay. There's lots of stuff that you might find interesting just from a geographical and topographical point of view. The focus is on tides and winds and currents, but also managing drift. Okay, that's very important. All right, and then some safety stuff, and we're going to talk about Dean and Eddie, and do some case studies. Okay, so and then I've got some resources. If we have time, I got to talk really fast. Okay, so we might get into Tomales Bay and Driggs Estero. So let me begin by saying, look, I trust your skills. I trust your knowledge. If I tell you something you already know, it's just a matter of, again, collecting all this stuff. So feel free to, chime in. We have a limited amount of time, but I have learned over time that one of the most important roles on the water is the lead boat. Okay. The second is the sweep boat, and third and fourth are the rovers. Right. Those are our roles. And if we don't understand the bay and the dynamics of the bay and drift, okay, there can be problems, okay? And having done this for a long time, there have been problems, all right? Including I had to call the Coast Guard once, all right? Long story. So that's where I'm going with this. And there's also things like here, where to stop for a rally point, gather up, and where there are, tidal issues might affect your beach positioning of the boats and so forth, and then emergency management, and where to bail out, where are the bailout points. All right, so I want to do a quick overview of the bay and looking down at how many of you are from this Bay Area? Most, half of most. Okay, so I'm obviously we get guides from all over the place. So those of you that aren't native to this area, what you'll see here is an overview. This is going to be a little cumbersome. Is that we have the confluence of the Sacramento and San Joaquin rivers coming together, and basically all of the Sierra water comes through this little narrow strait here, the Carquinez Strait, with a raging current, which is where I live, and then it comes around here to San Pablo Bay and down through the bay and through the Golden Gate. So looking at that, okay. Name?
Golden Gate.
No, that point right there. Ding. Okay. Where's this? Ding. What's that?
Horseshoe Cove.
That's Horseshoe Cove. Yellow Bluff. Okay. On the next slide, I'll cover it. Okay. Anybody tell me what that is? Ding. Where's that? Ding. Where's that? Camp Reynolds. Okay. Ding. Right. Here.
Rose Beach.
Rose Beach. Okay. So let me fill this in. It's important to know the landmarks because we refer to it as guides, and trip leaders do this all the time. oh, let's go up to here and here and here. Nobody really knows it, or particularly the younger guys who aren't familiar with these big points. We have Lime Point, Kirby Cove. We go on often under the gate to land at Kirby Cove. It's off the site. Raccoon Strait, of course, between Belvedere Point or Peninsula Point or Point Belvedere, whatever. And then Point Stewart, right? Very important point. And then Camp Reynolds Burroughs Beach. We also have Point Blunt, Corey Beach on the other side that you went around in training, right? And the town of Tiburon, and then Iola Cove is over here. So here's, a perspective of these locations. Here's that. And it's useful to know. And then looking more closely at Richardson Bay, we have the Audubon Observatory, right, which is closed to boating here. But notice that there's a channel up the side and into that little space. How many of you been up there? Okay, a couple of you, but this is a really nice paddle, but don't go there during certain times of year, all right? And so on the water, we have a series of markers, and you'll find them in different locations, all right? So you're familiar with the boat channel, the ship channel that goes down here, and the markers there. Okay, so what's the phrase for those markers?
About right return.
Red right returning. Okay, so if you're coming back to the marina, you want that marker on your right side. All right, so it's on your left side, you're going out. All right, and you guys are familiar with the marker at Cone Rock, right? And that's a good rally point. And then the green buoy, which is right there. Okay, so those are very important water markers for safe paddling. And so here's an overview of the ferry routes on the bay. And as you know, where we paddle is often right across here, and we're getting ferries going through here to Tiburon and off and so forth. We sometimes will come across this line. So be aware of the ferry routes, and not necessarily the frequency, but just be aware that those ferries going through here, through Raccoon Straits, their weight can compound what's naturally a turbulent area anyway, right? But just check that out. And when you get out here and you think about paddling across, you're dealing with a much bigger ship channel, the tanker routes through there.
Mark,
Yes.
just hi everybody, Diane. Hello, everybody. In regards to ferries, I just want to say, if you see a ferry and you're with a group and you're doing a crossing or you're getting ready to go to Angel Island, like if it's really far away, fine. If you can, you feel like you can make it to where you need to go, say from Angel Island to Belvedere Point. But I oftentimes just wait out, don't take the ferries because.
And that applies to tankers, and particularly on the Carquinez Strait or in those places. If you see the tanker, don't think about crossing. They're coming way faster than you think they are. All right. So let's take a look at what's actually under the bay. And I don't know whether you guys have seen this, but it's fascinating to know that it's like 390 feet underneath the gate. There's this tremendous drop off there. And so let's take a look at that in an animated form. Let's go over here to this. And this is a really fascinating video of that. So
there's more water that flows, more volume of water that flows from north to south tower than any place on the planet. In terms of gallons per day.
So follow me as we fly over the bottom of the bay. And right here, notice the channel that you don't see when you go across the San Mateo Bridge.
Does that have any impact in terms of the water turbulence or no?
Absolutely it does.
Yeah, the deeper it is, the more volume of water, the greater the speed.
So I know it's a little blurry because it's really big, but you can see coming up, that's Treasure Island. Here's the, Pier 39 and stuff, Alcatraz, Angel Island, Point Blunt over there. But look, there's a submerged rock, the drop off on the south side of Alcatraz, coming up here. Notice this big scoop around Point Blunt. It could be very turbulent in here. Coming up and around Corey Beach over here. Look at all the stuff that's going underneath. We're coming up on the Centerfell Bridge. And notice those streaks. What are those streaks? Those are the pilings of the bridge. You can kind of see how the sand is streaked behind the pilings of the San Rafael Bridge. But look how kind of shallow and smooth it is. Coming around San Rafael, what is it? What's the name of that camp?
China Camp.
China Camp.
Yeah, China Camp, right, okay. So here we are on, coming up on Tiburon Point. And notice now we're beginning to see a drop off, all right? And as we go down into Raccoon Strait, look at that drop off, and right down in here, big hole at Point Stewart, big hole at Belvedere Point, and coming back around shallower in Richardson Bay. And we got those ripples out there, and all of this affects the surface water, okay? As the water comes through, you're getting, the reflection of the water going on the rocks. Coming up here, I guess that's Point Blunt again, big sandbar here, and we're gonna go out through the gate.
Mark, can you stop on, whoop, and when you can't go back?
Yeah, hang on here. And we're coming around here, and now we're going out the gate. Okay, Alcatraz, look at all this stuff out here. And then the rocks buried underneath, the tankers have to take that into consideration if the tide is down. And now through the gate. I just find this totally fascinating, because we're always on the surface.
So all those things are on the underneath, arch rock, shag rock,
Yeah,
parting rock.
there'll be a quiz.
Yeah.
What's the third rock on the left? Okay, and then coming up here, and all the sandbars off the Marina Green, right? Coming up and around, what is it, Presidio, and there you go, and right down into that. Look at that. Swooping through there, Kirby Cove over there. And when you look at the force of the volume of water going through there, as I mentioned.
It's an old river canyon.
Yeah, exactly. It was formed by all the brontosauruses who were escaping the sun and dragging their tails through the Jurassic stage. Okay, and then there's all the sandbars out here, rippling through, obviously makes sense. The Farallones are out here, okay? And I don't know if you've ever seen them, but there can be standing waves out here at different times of the season. So coming around here, we're gonna go up.
Is that like China Beach? What is that? That's going around from the gate and going out.
This is going, yeah, that's,
Richmond and Seacliff and all that.
yes, that's Baker Beach. And coming back around and looking down on us. And obviously, that's Richardson Bay, coming up on the rocks, Alcatraz, and looking at that, okay? So, I just find that really fascinating, because we paddle over that all the time. And even in your environmental education, you can point out, we're paddling along, and how deep it is here? It's 10 feet, it's over there, 400 feet deep, and you can kind of point that out. So let's go back to here. Let's do it again. Oh, that's the next one. Stop, okay. Let's go back to here. So, yeah, all right. So this is just a quick overview of what we're paddling over, having the routes that we go over. So, you can see, as I mentioned, when we come across on the ebb, we're coming across Raccoon Strait, we're paddling over that big deep area. If we go straight across, we're in fairly open water. And coming around Angel Island, we often get curved in here to Sunset Beach and so forth. And then looking at this is coming around, this is around over the gate, okay? So how many of you have gone under the gate? A couple of you? Oh, wow, more than I thought. Okay, good. It's different on the other side. Okay, as soon as you go through the gate, the water changes dramatically, okay? So be aware. And we'll talk about currents in a little bit. And then coming around Point Blunt, which is on the far side of Angel Island, again, you can cut across here, you can come around here. We saw that big drop off that was there at Point Blunt. A lot of turbulent water right in here. Why? Because it drops off here in this interaction. I'm sure you saw that on your circumnavigation. So center part of this is the tides and currents and winds. All right. So why should you care about tides? All right. How much beach will there be for launching and landing, right? The water level will expose rocks. If you've been around Belvedere Point, that rock can be completely gone, or it can be very exposed, a whole set of rocks. We want to look at, will the tide rise and float away our boats? Having had that happen to me on personal trips twice, you've got to keep track of the tides when you're hiking with friends and everything else. Also, where the strong currents will be along your route and how to factor that in based on the tide changes. And then will it create strong drift? All right, because the tide creates, there's other things that cause drift, but this is a major factor. So what causes tides? This isn't a science class, but it's real straightforward, that the sun and the moon influence the water on the planet, and the planet is spinning. So there's a little lag time. Actually, when we look at this, the earth is spinning and it's also carrying the water with it, the drag of that water. So this is just basically an illustration. But when we have these new moon tide where the moon is on this side, the moon is on this side, when it's opposite like that, it's pulling, okay, it's about 20% higher than these other tides. All right, so just be aware that you can look at the tide of the moon chart, or the month, time of the month for the moon, and kind of get a sense of what's going on. All right, but other factors affect the tides. Okay, so I assume you got all of that from your high school science class, but it's interesting that we've had classes where some people didn't quite know what caused the tides. So real simple, tide affects the height, and it's cyclical. About here, at least here in our geography, it's about a 6-hour cycle. Other places, it's different timing. And it varies in height, as you will see in later, that the high tide at various days and times is different, dramatically different, one day to the next. And of course, it creates currents. Currents create potential for turbulence and high flow rates. So here's taking a look at this particular, these are screenshots from an app. And I guess you guys use the iTide, but I didn't replace all this. But notice here's a 0 mark on this app. Okay, so the tide comes down to about mean low tide, and then it comes back up. And so here we've got it below 0. That's a minus tide, right? And so that's a 1 foot minus tide and a 2 foot minus tide. And how would you interpret this if you had those 3 days? This is Saturday, Monday, and Friday. Looking at it from a guide point of view, how would you relate to these? Just impressions. I show you this one. What would you say? I'm showing you this one or that one.
Depends on where you're going.
I think that's the biggest thing.
Well,
Where are you?
We're going on a kayak trip typically to, Sea Glass Beach or
Okay,
Angel
so
Island.
so Sea Glass
Yeah.
Beach.
In
So,
general,
yeah.
or Angel Island. So, I mean, just impressions. That's a modest ebb and a modest flood. That's going to be a raging
Are
flood.
you looking at the tide chart?
I'm
No,
looking
you're not
at the
you're
tide
not
chart.
looking at the current chart.
I'm looking at the tide chart,
Right.
right, exactly. And this is an off of Angel
But when you're going from a high tide to a low tide, your ebb is going to be more dramatic when it's doing that. So
This says it's changing an enormous amount of volume of water in a very short amount of time, and it's going to be a stronger current. And so, like I said, in terms of varying time of day, peak high tide here, different, right? And we've got different, and even there, different. Okay,
So at the peak of that high tide there probably wouldn't be beach, for instance,
Yeah,
at Sea Glass. So the
exactly.
really critical thing in looking at these charts for tides
Right.
is if you're going to a beach to know, is there gonna be a beach to land on? If you're landing at Point Stewart and you have a really high tide, again, there's not gonna be much beach.
Exactly,
And
and
so
Cape
it's-
Reynolds and all those places now.
Strategize.
So along those lines, exactly. If I were going to Strawberry, and we're going to talk about this, and I'll point that out later, this wouldn't work on a minus tide going up, which is a big wall. It was all just mud. Whereas, it needs to be 3 feet.
I do.
So that would work. We'll talk about that. But anyway, just be familiar with the variations that come along here, right? So those tides create currents. And why should you care about that? Well, obviously, am I going to run into rough water along my route? Will it affect our bearing? In other words, our bearing is not necessarily where we're going, but where we're pointing, or how, in effect, our trip is planned. And will it create a helping force or a hindering force? Can my group handle paddling against a flood? Or can we paddling against an ebb? And it may be too strong, or it may just be we need to find an easier route. And then if something happens, will the drift, while we're dealing with the rescue, literally push us out the gate or take us into a rock or some unsafe place? Okay, so and currents can do that. And so the other question that we're gonna deal with is where do I find calm water? All right, so we'll come around to that. So obviously, the movements of the water are caused by tidal level changes, but also the river flow. So if we get a hellacious rain up in the Sierras, which happens, those tide charts, those high and low level charts, those current reading charts may be off by an hour, maybe off completely, you know? So factor that in. And it obviously doesn't go from, oh, it rained an hour ago in the Sierras, it's gonna be hellacious here. No, it could be a day, 2 days, or 3 days. Flat, yes.
So always in the spring and early summer, especially when you have a lot of snow like this year, even though it might say that there's a flood coming,
Right.
Could still be on
the
the
snow melt is gonna change that ebb, and it's gonna continue for an hour or two longer, and you might never see that flood.
Yes.
So it's something to factor in that the tide load's not gonna factor for you,
Right.
because it doesn't know if there was a high run, if there's gonna be a high runoff here.
So a message through this whole presentation is what you see is often, or experience is way more important than what's in the book, okay? So learn how to observe, learn how to see on the water and feel it and get a sense of your experience on the water and begin to correlate what you're seeing with what you might expect. And also then the wind is also a factor in currents. You know, the wind on the top of the water can be different than the water underneath if it's a howling wind. So bottom line is, the effects of currents can, again, cause very strong drift. They can cause turbulent or confused waters. You know, they see that choppy water off of Raccoon Strait. You know, when the waves are in line going one way or the other, that's fairly organized. But when it's like, I don't know what's going on, it can be dancing in 3 different directions. And it can also create eddies, good, and whirlpools, like out at the mouth of the Russian River. You get tidal currents. There will be whirlpools, which is a trip.
You'll also get whirlpools at Point Stewart.
Yeah,
And at Point One.
yes, exactly. We're gonna show.
And Point Stewart, which is a really critical point for et cetera, because you have to go past Point Stewart to get to Angel Island. In Point Stewart, there's a half a mile eddy, really shallow water off of Point Stewart. So what that does is that creates an opposing
Right.
current flow. And because of that, and especially with winds, if you have a flood, basically a flood current coming in to Raccoon Strait, imagine, so you've got water coming into Raccoon Strait, right? And you hit that Point Stewart buoy. Because of the eddy, it's gonna create an opposing force, which we call dancing or popcorn water.
We'll show that in the charts. Yeah. So bottom line, real simple. When the current is bringing water in, it's called a flood, and when it's taking the water out, it's called an ebb. And when it's theoretically in that very short amount of time where it's changing, it's called slack. All right. And so it's, quote, still water. Okay. I want to point that out. Okay. So when is slack? If I showed you that tide chart a minute ago, when is slack? Could you figure it out? So I said, okay, high tide at Point Stewart is noon. High tide at Camp Reynolds is noon. When is slack? So that's high tide. When is high slack? When would it be changing to ebbing? High tide at noon.
Like 30 p.m.
What's that?
Like 3 p.m.
Halfway in between?
No, it's when it's changing. So it's at the pinnacle point, I think.
Okay, we'll take a look. We'll do some comparisons. It's going to vary. It's going to be different. But high slack is always lagging high tide. Okay. So these are
Okay.
detailed charts, but what you've got here is Raccoon Strait, and you've got the tide level and the current level. And notice the peaks. We have a peak current. What is this? This is okay.
Right before the
Right.
peak of the tide.
Exactly. So here we have slack. Slack is lagging.
Yeah.
Right. The high tide. Okay. And the opposite of that is tide lags current. So if I know max current, max current, I know that the tide is gonna potentially be coming up, all right? So you have those factors, it's not a direct, same time, same thing, all right? So let's go along here, and again, here's a correlation between where slack is on the current chart and where it is time-wise. It just happens, it's right at noon, right here at noon. It's slack lags tide, and then we have max current, okay? Tide lags max current, okay? And
This is
notice
rule of sixes.
it's, who said halfway? You said, somebody said halfway? Okay, so here is a 7-hour span, right? 4 hours to slack, or to slack, and 3 hours after, so it's not symmetrical, okay?
Well, that has to also do, is that the rule of sixes or rule of 12? The rule of sixes or rule of 12s where the first, you'll get the most, like, as you go through the first part, the first sixth of your tide increase, your current will increase 1/6, the next will be 2/3, or 2/6, and then 3/6, and then opposite.
Yeah, but again, that's more of a symmetrical model, two and 4 and 2, or 2 and
Right,
whatever.
yeah.
But you had a question?
So to bring this to like planning trips.
Yeah.
What's
So
that?
I'm like, cool, we're reading tides and all, but like for planning trips, are you saying that we should plan the trip according to like the slack time? Because that'll be the least amount of effort for kayakers, or what's the take home message?
It depends. And we're gonna kind of go through that. We're kind of building on, this is more definitional,
Mhm.
all right? So I just want to point out that, notice the picture, I think that actually might be Diane in that picture there. This is off of Raccoon Strait at slack. Okay? Very confused water, all right? It's highly localized, okay? Because it changes. Slack here is different than slack there, right? Because the water moves at different times, and again, we'll see that, all right? So the acronym I use, or the phrase is a little salt and TLC, okay? Slack lags tide, and tide lags max current, okay? So taking a look at this at the Golden Gate versus Raccoon Strait, which you've got your charts, and you're kind of doing that offset. Here we have the Golden Gate peaking at 12:39, come down here. Well, wait a minute, Raccoon Strait ebbed early? Well, of course, it's further east. We're bringing the water out, okay? Whereas, if we were dealing with it, anyway, at a different location, it might be a different timing, all right? So again, here's that, and we've got that happening in advance, all right? So location matters a great deal. All right, so and here's another one looking at Angel Island, west side, which is the side that Raccoon Strait is on. Okay, so here we have low tide, that one was current, low tide, right? We're still getting an F, right, until we get slack, right? So here we got low tide, it's low tide, but slack lags tide. So I'm not getting a slack until, that much later, and that could be as much as an hour. All right, big deal. All right, so factor that in. So let's go to here. And so one of the things that we notice on the bay, unlike other locations, we're at a prime location where we've got a freshwater flow through Raccoon Strait hitting salt water, all right? And so salt water is below the freshwater, all right? But it's not a solid line, it's these tapering off, okay? And so in this zone, you're getting a lot of influence of that mixture and current, and you can actually see it as that surface edge right there-ish, okay? And so let me show you some real pictures of this. Okay, so here, this is a very good shot. I don't know what, I'm kind of a student of this location. You stand up here or up on the bluff and watch, you can see the line, right? And you can watch that line move. And you can see the sailboats coming down, just cruising along just fine. They hit that line, and all of a sudden they're bouncing all over the place. Well, we are boats, and so we'll be paddling along, and we got to get around the point. We've got to go through this, right? That can be really treacherous, all right? And so that zone is about that wide, and you can watch it drift. It's generally smooth water on that side, turbulence here, right? So be aware that that zone is wide and can be very treacherous. at different times of day. All right, so here, let's go to, yeah, there. That one. So looking at it kind of in treacherous water to calm water, where would we find the roughest water? Under the bridge, you know? Not necessarily breaking waves and stuff, but just big swells and so forth, particularly on the north side. Yellow Bluff, how many of you have been to Yellow Bluff? You've been to Yellow Bluff, that can be really tricky waves coming this way. Throw in a boat wake, and it's rock and roll, okay? Also off of, kind of out here off of Pearls Beach, further out, you know, if you let your group get expanded and drift a little bit out into the zone, you'll notice there's some heavy waves coming around Point Blunt they be fine, but if you drift into this zone, that can be really strong water, all right? So we're talking about this kind of waves. Now that's the sewage treatment plant. This was taken off of, obviously, Seagrass Beach is right here. Okay, rough water, right in this zone right here, okay? So be aware of those spots. And then, you know, more challenging water that we'll find is gonna be the middle of the bay, which I don't encourage you to go into, but you might, off to the southwest of the Green Buoy. I've done a lot of nighttime trips, the full moon paddle and stuff, and we come up kind of the daylight, come back at night. The right side of the Green Buoy can be outrageously treacherous, whereas the inside can actually be pretty decent. Just in a zone of 50 yards, you can actually see a difference, all right? We obviously get turbulent water off of Point Stewart. The water on an ebb wraps around here. You come around Isla Cove, crossing that eddy line can be treacherous, and of course on Point Blunt. Now, so that said, where are we going to find calm water? Well, we're going to find it in further into Richardson Bay, places where there are little coves, STP Cove. Okay, here at Kirby Cove, we're protected here, Horseshoe Cove. Camp Reynolds is part of a protected part, particularly in an ebb. Quarry Beach and around that side, definitely Isla Cove. But the transition areas, those are places you need to tap into, because, you know, if you're not telling your group, you can make it through. You're a guide, you know what you're doing. It's getting your group through and dragged out. Yes.
Just to Mark's point, obviously, every day and every area is really different. Part of my job as program manager is going to be to set up a trip as close as I can to the group's abilities, and then talk to you as trip leaders and as guides before your trip about, you know, what to expect in terms of currents, especially with Angel Island. We're really trying to moderate in terms of forecasted currents, what we're going to see out there, especially in terms of the flood. But as you say, every day will be different.
Yeah, and just in terms of, let's go back here. Where's the red ones? Right there. Okay, so on the International Belvedere Point turbulence scale, okay, 1 to 10, Diane and I have been out there in like an 11 or 12. Okay, don't go around this point if it's an 8 or higher. How do you know? Experience. You know, you go out there and you see it and you feel that the turbulence on the other side, thinking about, you're in a single and you've got experience. You think about a single sending its nose into a raging ebb across that point, and what that's going to do to their boat if they don't pay attention or angle properly and all that, right? So we've actually backed away. I've backed away from twice in 25 years from going around it, just going up, you know, the lead boat, and then maybe another guy goes up and then scouts the place and go. Not now, but part of that though is half an hour later, it might be just smooth as silk, you know, but you have to back off at the time. You're not going to sit there on the beach, you know, on the waves waiting, maybe.
Well, and it also really is impacted by the winds.
Yes.
You know, so you could have, you know, major currents and mellow winds, and you might be able to do it, but you could have medium currents and strong winds,
Yeah.
and it still might not be a wise choice.
Yeah, so it's all about the surface water and what it will do to your boats. Okay, so this is
When you said you're scouting it out, are you going inside the buoy or around it?
no. Well, when I scout a trip around Point Belvedere, it depends. If the rocks are flooded,
Right.
and I know from experience that there's a good, you know, foot clearance or something like that, it's like, okay, we can go over those because the other rocks are lower than the
Right.
big rock. If I see it's exposed, but it's like really pounding on this side, I'll say, all right, I'll watch the crashing waves on the point and say, let's cut through. So it really does vary depending on the height. And you can have the rocks well exposed. You know, if it's rocking and rolling over here, but it's not really splashing on this side, the rocks take some of that out. You can put a course through, but the decision on the trip leader's part is, do I go through one boat at a time? Escort, you know, take one boat through, park them, you know, take another boat through, park them, you know, and so forth. Do we do a line? Or do we do a group around the point, or do we do goalposts, right? You know, when outside the rock, we put a guide on the inside, guide on the outside, they go between and around. So you kind of play it by ear, but you always station guides inside and outside, wherever they're gonna go, to be a response, and you always have a first guide over, you know, on the receiving end to say, paddle toward Patty, okay? And if ideally, Patty would go through first, and the first boat through with the guide would say, I get you, you know, around here, and then go see Mark on further out, and you stay there, and so it's a passing between the goalpost, the guide, and the end.
And we're not gonna do those Sam's paddles this year, but you may experience something like that with going to Sea Glass, where there is a place where you wanna have a guide station where you
Yeah.
can see the beach and see people in the cove. So
Right.
it's a useful set of skills.
Yes.
For anybody thinking about like night paddle at Point Belvedere, that's not on the calendar
Yeah.
this
Well,
year.
and so that positioning of the guide boats in that arc is something that you should be aware of, okay? So you've got one boat with the group, one boat at the end, and maybe one or two handoff boats that can see both ways. So this boat on the beach is waiting, don't send anybody, you know, and they can relay that in, okay? But if all the guides go around and they're gone, the last boat is like, I don't know, okay, it's
Yeah,
fine, you
you
know,
wanna-
Mark, can you go back to your last slide?
sure.
Thank you. So this is just in response to the question of what's that have to do with a kayak trip? And let's say you have a really, so Andrew did a really good thing this year, which he looked at the tide log before scheduling trips, overnight trips to Angel Island, to make sure that there weren't strong floods when we would be doing crossings. And he asked for those dates, even if we didn't have trips scheduled yet, just to prevent a problem of a strong flood at Point Stewart, where you have all that crazy popcorn water. But let's say I have a group and here I am at Belvedere Point, and because we're not gonna have strong floods when we're gonna cross over to here, right? To Camp Reynolds. But we might have a decent ebb.
We're gonna talk about routes.
You're gonna go there?
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
I just, do you have this, because this is such a great map to look when there's a strong ebb.
Yeah.
And this year we're gonna have a permanent app.
You
Yeah.
can,
We'll talk about
exactly,
that.
because you can cut in
Yeah.
here and go up to here and then cross. I just wanted to show that.
You didn't listen to the slide.
So useful.
So anyway, all right, so the third factor, you've got tides and currents and then wind. Wind is a big factor on the bay, and where it's coming from and how it affects us. It's still, why do we care about winds? Well, winds create rough water, obviously. Will winds affect my bearing, right? Got to factor that into the tides and currents. Will it be a help or hindrance? Are we paddling against the wind, or we got it at our back? And I have literally done in some places here, a headwind going out and a headwind coming about halfway back. It's like, how does that work? Because it changes locationally, all right? So what happens if stuff happens? Will the wind cause me to drift into someplace unsafe? And again, the Coast Guard call they made was all about a 36-mile-an-hour wind blowing a team with a capsized boat to Berkeley. Okay, so let's take a look at this. This is a simplified version, more graphics, but you know, we've got the windward side and the lee side, or the wind shadow over any sort of lump the wind needs to roll over. So I would say, hey, go hang out on the lee side or the wind shadow behind the sailboat, because that's an object, right? You know what I'm talking about. Go ahead to the lee side. It's like the wind is coming this way. Here's the boat. I'm going to be on the opposite side, right? It's going to be calmer, right? And so things that stick out. What is this? This is, you know, STP Cove, or this is, you know, Point Stewart, or any of those. The wind's coming down here and it's going over the top of that, creating potential turbulence here. I'll show that maybe in the next slide. Okay, so this area could have a different wind pattern than the ones going around. And here coming through a tight terrain can intensify the wind. That can be more of a wind tunnel. And here you can also get things wrapping the wind in, whereas, 100 yards out, it might be going straight. We've got a different wind environment closer to shore. So all of those factors, you can't just generalize, oh, the wind is from the southwest. It's localized, all right, and it changes. Okay, so here we go. Here, we're on the wind shadow. This is like maybe the Sausalito Ridge, the Marine Headlands, whatever. We got the wind coming across here. This is called a rotor, okay, in the hang gliding terms. This is a rotor where the wind comes down and it actually can wrap back around. All right, so you're going to get gusts across the water here that are really squirrely because these are literally swirls that come through on the water and then disappear. Okay, so be aware of those, and I'll show you a little bit right here. Okay, so here, boy, I need a better shot of this. But when you can impress the young people, like I can see that gust coming. I can see the wind, right? Well, how do you see the wind? It's ripply, right? Notice this, it's right here, it's ripply, whereas that's calm water. That's calm water. So here we got a gust of wind here, got a gust of wind here. If I'm here and I see that, I'm gonna go, oh, it's a hard gust. Brace yourself, keep your nose into the gust, something like that. We're all just gotta be personally prepared. Bring your paddles down, okay? On the bay, you wanna keep your paddles like this below your chin, because you don't wanna be going like the whitewater boats, right? So just be aware that you can read the water with those kind of gusts coming, and they may dissipate. You see one coming right like 10 feet in front of you, they may just disappear, all right, so when you hear the weather reports, like, oh, we're gonna get a southwest wind or northeast wind or whatever, the Richardson Bay is laid out like this. So if they say, whether this afternoon we're gonna get, 10 to 15 mile an hour northwest winds, well, that's blowing right down Richardson Bay, which is the way it always blows, unless it's blowing from the west, right? Which is also where it blows. So if you come across Dumpy Bay, you're coming across here, where's it blowing you? It's blowing you into the ship channel, right? All right, so when we do this, and I'll maybe show it on the side, rather than going straight across here on a southwest wind or any west wind, we're coming into this bay to counteract that. So we end up here instead of going here and finding that half the boats end out in the ship channel. Okay, so that's kind of a standard practice. If there's any wind, and there's always going to be wind in that direction. So this is a strong wind area. This can be a strong wind area, and these are destination points along here, just as landmarks. All right. So being aware of the geography as it relates to the direction of the wind when you hear the reports is useful.
Mark, can you show where Sea Track is?
Yeah, Sea Track is right there at Schoonmaker. Sea Track
Right.
is right here.
And there is notoriously a wind gust.
Yeah, right there.
That happens there. If you're going to the houseboats, it's sort of survived with the houseboats now, and it's sort of has surprised me with how gusty it can actually be there. Sometimes even more than over, by the Sparrow Hurricane Gulch. It's
Well,
really
and even our beach can be having, and the thing is, we'll go through some wind charts, but I've showed up at, meet the guys at 4:30, we're meeting the guests at 6:30, we're setting up the beach, 35 mile an hour wind going. Is this really gonna make any sense? 6 o'clock, calm as can be, So again, there are learning the charts of the winds. This is one snapshot of a couple of days on Willie weather, all right? And this is Richardson Bay at the yacht harbor, which is up between the Spinnaker and the ferry terminal, right? You see, well, what's this? This is 12 mile an hour winds, all right? When I had a kayaking company and I led trips, my orange zone started at 12. 12 to 15 was like orange, 15 to 18 was yellow, and after 18, I didn't take people out, okay? And I've been out, we've done plenty of 25 mile an hour wind stuff, but this is hard to paddle in, all right? Morning, you're setting up, it's nice. Look at the direction here, come up, that's all nice and even, but then it changes, later on. And this one, in the morning, come down here, and then it gets all squirrely during the day. Look at that, it actually reverses itself a couple times during the day. So, what does that say? nothing's predictable.
Yeah.
Right? You can't really tell. Early day there, and it reverses itself right about sunrise, something like that. Why is that? It reverses itself from here to here to here, and it changes around. So just be aware that as you're planning, prepare for the unexpected, particularly if they're talking about unusual weather or strong gusty winds. On the lake, it's just generally just blowing across smooth, but we got so much topography and stuff, it's crazy. All right, so in summary, tide level can affect your choice of destinations and make it easier or harder to get to your location. The direction of the winds and currents can make it harder and affect your course, and add to or diminish resistance. And sudden changes can create hazardous paddling conditions, and it happens often. So be aware that these two factors called drift, and that again is one of the undercurrents of today. We're moving in that direction to talk about drift. All right, so just a quick mention of underwater awareness. All right, so we're talking about here are let's go back. Where's back? Okay, anyway, we start off at Schoonmaker and we're making our way across to Sea Glass Beach. And these red dots represent what I call slinky stops. You guys know what a slinky is? Everybody old enough to know what it's, okay, so you stretch it out, you let go, and right? Lead boats need to understand where the slinky stops are. For my trips, like your trips, my trips have designated slinky stops. It's obvious, it's not just random. You take off here, you do a slinky stop here right at the end of the marina. Why? Because that's where everybody needs their rudders adjusted. Okay, and you want to check in, gather up, everybody comfortable, blah, blah. And then you get ready and you curve into Dumpy Bay because there's always a wind, right? You don't go straight across. And you stop at the other side, check out the seals, but also gather up, right? When you paddle up here, you're going to go past, the Taj Mahal, and you're going to end up, let's see, where are we? Okay, so here we're going to gather up at Tugboat Cove, and again, group up. It's a nice calm spot. It's a very obvious place. Then we're going to come through and around the spinnaker, gather up on the opposite side of the spinnaker, and we're going to come up and we're going to gather before the ferry dock, check out the whole scene, and then proceed down and you get past the Trident. A good place to gather up before you cross Hurricane Gulch is the seal sculpture that isn't there. Okay, it'll be back and washed away, but there's a seal sculpture. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Okay, that's a great rally point because you're getting ready to cross Hurricane Gulch. And again, you curve into Hurricane Gulch, depending on the intensity, and gather up at the flagpole. Everybody know the flagpole right there at the end, right? You can't miss it.
Yeah.
Paddle toward the flagpole, right? And then the lead boat gets there and waits. They don't go on, they wait, right? So, and then we continue on to, there's the flagpole. We go up to, we go up to STP Cove, and you gather up there, and that's where the landing boats go around, and you begin to position your landing staging, okay, with all the boats in a calm place, calm from the wind and also calm from the currents. And when I say STP Cove, we're not talking about 100 yards back, we're not talking about 50 yards out, we're talking about in the cove, up against the wall, where you're gathered in a position that you can control the boats. And then further, and if you continue further up, you get to Yellow Bluff and everything else. All right, so that's getting to Sea Glass Beach. And let's take a look at going to the houseboats. All right, so we're going to start this trek at Schoonmaker. You come down here, you gather up there across from Sea Track. That's a nice distance to get. Check out the rudders, comfort, all that kind of stuff. Paddle across, and then before the L, bail out here at Fish if you need to. Something's gone wrong, you need a phone call. Fish Restaurant is a safety spot. Come up here before we make the curve. Just make sure everybody's gathered up. Continue across. This is where the seals are and stuff. Make sure they're staying outside, away from the seals. And right before you kind of get to the end of that whole marina, gather everybody up because we're going to come into the scope. Whether you come down and in or straight across, whatever. Gather up before you go in and give them the talk about, hey, this is somebody's backyard. Don't be hoot and holler and stare at people's windows, right? So that's a logical place for every lead boat to just say, I know where I'm going. And I'm not saying on the radio, hey, lead boat, go over here. Wait a minute, you're going too far. It's given, okay? So, and I know that's probably not agency's official policy, but it works, so, pardon me for that. Okay, so be aware, by the way, you know that the seaplane landing area, right, is in that zone. And so let's go up a little further and extend our trip over to Strawberry. So we can either, cut across here, we can go up to the platform, there's a platform as a marker there, that would be a stop, and then cut across there up to Strawberry Park or Brookyard Park, depending on what you want to call it. And this is where we need at least 3 feet of water when we arrive. Not when we leave, but when we arrive, because otherwise it's just mud, okay? And that can be a drag, all right? And so I think I talked about this. Let me see if I can talk about it. Yeah, okay, so if you decided to go into what I call the bayou, coming around here at Strawberry Lagoon, you're gonna cross, stop, gather up, continue down, nice stretch, let people, but you're gonna, paddle, and then here before you go in, and so forth, then you go up and around.
So you say, Mark,
That's on Voodoo Island, but
Don't land on the island, right? The island here, this is,
show the island.
yeah, this is the island, and,
right.
yeah, it's I guess there's a cut across.
Well, there's a cut through there.
Yeah, anyway, you're not supposed to land on the
So-
island. right?
So when it's closed, you can still go right again?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, there is a legal, because people have
How
their
far
votes
out
and
does it go?
far
I
enough.
mean, okay,
Yeah,
I mean, I've done it, but I don't know.
I'm actually not sure whether there's an official marker. I don't think there's a marker.
Oh,
There
Yeah,
is.
there's markers.
There's markers,
Yeah.
yeah, so bottom line, there's plenty of space to go.
And
along.
there's a tiny opening that goes into, so that the water inside is called Harbor Point.
Okay,
So that's where Harbor Point
There you
Swim
go.
Club is, and you can go either direction, because that is an
Yes.
island, you just can't see the north part of the island.
yeah, you can go, up and around, or you can go up and back, depending on the time, because this is actually quite far. You've got to have
It
some
is.
time to go
Yeah,
in,
it's
right? And it really does extend the trip. And again, you got to factor in the depth.
You've also got the trip on the left, you go under the freeway, which can only be done in, very high water. That
Right.
gets
Yeah.
really narrow really quickly.
And
but
the
it's
soccer
also
fields, this is
super
one of those things
fun.
where you damn well better not have a headwind.
Right.
Tailwind can be fun, but you paddle up to here, gather before the pilings. Going under the pilings is fun, but again, you get some heavy winds and some water and stuff like that. You go up here, you pretty much have to be shown where to land there, okay? But there's the soccer fields and you can get out and do that kind of stuff. Getting people out
Generally
of boats
getting
and
up that
stuff.
far though, you need almost a king tide.
What's that?
You almost need
You
a
know,
high tide.
But a high tide.
High tide, yeah.
Yeah, a good high tide.
But
Again,
also,
when you get there.
going around the island, it's really important to remember that you've gotta have enough water because you can get stuck. There's sandbars on either end.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And you'll be sitting there.
Yes. Okay, so these are just shots. I'm trying to gather better shots, but this is the area along going to that harbor
Harbor Point.
point lagoon, right, or whatever it's called.
Right.
And so, beautiful houses, Diane was there, I lived there. And this is coming back across, and so this area here with a west wind, you're crossing that whole stretch with a headwind. Okay, so what do you think about bringing a group of younger kids across that with a potential for headwind? What are you thinking?
Don't do it.
No, I mean, you're stuck on this side, you've got to get back. What are you thinking? Be prepared to tow,
Yeah.
Well,
right? The lead boat maybe can tow, sweet boat maybe can tow, but the rovers are gonna end up towing. Well, so if you've got rovers on tow and the rest of the group begins to drift, right, and they reposition a boat on tow isn't good. So the trip leader is thinking about all this, is like, okay, what happens when we get halfway across, we get tow, and blah, blah, blah. So just help out by being aware of this kind of stuff, all right? So, here's going to Angel Island. All right, we're gonna start
So
at,
before you go there, just go to the houseboats, the map again, and show the houseboats.
yes, okay,
Just because you are talking about route finding
Right,
and whatnot.
right,
And there's show the opening mark where the houseboats are, where everybody goes in for trick or treating
Right.
and that kind of thing. So that's like right in there. So Sea-Track has stopped going in there.
Yeah.
Because there've been a fair amount of complaints. But I think so long, you can go in there, so long as you don't go in super close
Right.
next to the houseboats, it's fine to go around in there. I mean, I love seeing kayaks come by the houseboats, but there,
It's their backyard.
it's just started to change in the past year.
Is
And
there a
people-
law or is it just?
No
like
law.
respectful?
It's respect.
It's literally a matter of courtesy.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's people's backyards, they're lounging, they got friends on their deck, and all of a sudden, a whole bunch of high school kids come through, and they go, oh, look at that. Oh, that kind of
Yeah,
stuff.
think about the size of your group and think
Yeah.
about, you know, how they're gonna behave. The other thing is, you know, even though that's a fairly calm area, you'll notice that as soon as you take a 5-minute break there, everybody's drifted into the
Right,
corner.
right.
And like, that's kind of intrusive to have
Exactly.
12 people on somebody's dock.
Keeping a group together, even in that enclosed environment, not having them go up against the side is a big deal.
Before you go,
Sure.
you go back, the other place we would stop, and it's it's like, it's not Black Sands, but it was somebody, you know what I'm talking about? Before you,
Oh. Like the beach? No.
it's before you go up to Strawberry, or whatever, on the side there.
Oh.
There was just a little thin beach that we
Yes,
would
yes.
stop
So
on.
you're talking about like, I think it's right.
Yeah, it's right in there, yeah.
right, exactly.
Sort of near
It's
the
actually a little
birdhouses.
closer to the point. I go do yoga there a lot.
Right, okay,
And you can't go there in really high tide, you can't go there in really low tide.
Right,
either,
right.
because
Yeah.
It's not much of a beach,
just
but-
It, you could use it as a,
Yeah.
we've taken kid trips over there.
yeah, so.
But before we.
In our private homes
Right,
that where people can complain, but public lands go
That's what I
to
was-
mean
That's what I was getting
high
to. I was like, I work for a state agency, it's like, it's still public.
It's the mean high. So if someone comes out and says, oh, this is private property, you know, always be respectful, but it's public access to the media.
Yes.
type.
Right.
That was.
So
what I
just
was
be aware of
talking
the-
about.
of the-
It's public access.
Emergency spots, if you get out, you know, you can stop in and Sea Trek, you know, that's close, whatever. Fish restaurant is right here, there's a boat ramp, and they'll ask you for landing at the boat ramp, if you've got an emergency, land on the boat ramp anyway. You come up here, there's the point of land, it's hard to land there, but if you needed to get somebody physically out, you can pull up and weasel them onto the land and then up to the houseboats. You know, if it's a really an emergency, you can knock on somebody's door, and then up here at Strawberry, you know, you'd actually have to go up and knock on somebody's house.
Yeah.
But in an emergency, if a medical emergency, you know, you've got the radio, but you can also use the phone.
what did you say, 3 feet, no less than 3 feet to land there?
Yes,
That's the same for Aquaman.
yes.
But,
So,
okay, and then what about sea glass?
Sea Glass Beach?
Yeah, in
Oh.
terms of landing there, because it gets.
On a high tide, you lose the beach, you know. They-
Okay.
Low tide's fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. So let's
Real
talk
quick
about,
point about Richardson Bay is just to say, Sea Trek has a skip that's very often on the water, so around that area, you may see them, or
Yes.
they may come and take a look at you, and they may ask if you're doing okay. That's something that's on the call down list in case of,
yes,
you know, emergency. You decide it's not a Coast Guard situation, but,
Right.
you know, they're often out there watching. the
Yeah,
water.
they've done that.
okay, we've got a situation, you know, we're on Richardson Bay, you know, whatever, how do we get a hold of Sea Trek?
Cell phone.
Or
Or radio, they often want,
You say Sea Trek on channel 16 or
69 or 71.
Or you can cycle through the public channels.
And a lot of times I've had, like, if, not that we take things out when it's questionable weather, but I've also had, you get to know the Sea Trek people.
Right,
So that, you know, they'll be like, hey, ETC, we're on 69 today, and
yes,
they'll just be on the radio.
Yeah. and the trip leader should be on the radios anyway, not the rest of the guides can be, but we should be monitoring channel 16. And even radios will do a cycle through all the public channels, you know, and just pick up the one that, okay, so this is going across to Angel Island, all right, so these are highly condition dependent. We've got the pretty much straight shot, okay? I wouldn't go straight, but I'd go over to the point, check out the conditions, and if it's calm, I'd go straight across, okay? But if we've got an ebb, floods, if we've got an ebb, I want to counteract that by going upstream and letting it push me down. How far in you go is based on the strength of the current. Now, let me ask you this. What's the highest current rate through the straits through the year? And the annual peak ebb,
You said what's the strongest ebb?
strongest ebb? Anybody guess?
In like,
Like king tides,
In a year, what's that?
during the king tide seasons, so like,
Regardless, just doing a chart, what's the highest,
So no,
yeah, what's the highest number of the ebb?
6 knots, 7.
It's generally 3.4,
Okay, so like-
maybe rarely 3.6, but if you see a 3.4, which we had a full moon paddle booked on 3.4, you go, that's one, literally in the top 10% of the strongest ebbs of the year. Now, what's the strongest floods? Okay, are they equal? The answer is no. Generally, a flood, the peak floods are less than the ebbs because we've got all that water coming down from the Sierras or whatever. Okay, so the peak floods, 2.5 to 3, something like that. The ebbs are 3 to 3.4, maybe 3.6. Okay.
And for reference, the max predicted flood, currents and all that,
Right.
depending that we've scheduled Angel Island trips for this year is no more than 1.5,
There you
1.6
go.
knots.
Right.
So
Right.
Nice.
really trying to moderate those
Mhm.
conditions.
And-
And even then, you'll see funny stuff behind the red buoy.
Right. Well, and part of it too, though, is if you're hung up, oh my God, we got a ebb, we got a ebb. 3 o'clock or 8, 10 o'clock when we're going to cross, maybe if you factor that in, 1.3, yeah, just paddle across. It's not a big deal, right? It's not.
But when we've had a group of younger people, we took up, we were coming around, Angel Island, and then we went right past Ayala Cove,
Right.
and we were going into the wind and into the, so it's, flooding,
Yes.
and we're trying to go this, we ended up ditching all the boats.
Yeah.
Ayala Cove.
That's
and
right.
Walk to the
That's
campsite.
there. Okay, so on a flood, you want to kind of, have the flood help you. Now, this, in my opinion, I know guides, Allison used to do this, paddle out to the red marker way off the entrance of Richardson Bay and then go out in the middle and curve around, all right? That's a big deal, open water area, okay? I just never felt comfortable about being that far out. Now, if you're dealing with a flood and you've got to counteract, you could go here and then maybe curve up and around, something like that, okay? So just be aware, I'm not casting asparagus on anybody's trip leading route. I'd just stay the hell away from that, okay? So, personal experience.
So basically, it's when it's ebbing, you do that triangle there.
Yeah, you
Which
go,
is
well, and here's the deal too. What are you doing? You're going around the point, okay? And if you've got an ebb that you're counteracting, that may be a thing. So you might want to consider coming out a little bit, not dealing with the turbulence right at the point, fight your way up and around. I know I was out there with that. I was Charlotte. No, I was in Charlotte and the other, anyway, we went all the way up here and then just let us take us across.
And when you go up from Belvedere to
Shocking.
Charlotte, you cut in close, because if there is an ebb, it's gonna be really tough to fight against it. So the goal is, you're gonna sneak around that point and cut up in, and there's
Yes.
like a little cove with a Cape Cod looking house right in there. And it's a great, and then you just kind of crawl up the coastline.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
then
Yeah.
cross over.
So again, from a slinky stop point of view, you gather up before this,
Yeah.
go around. This is a protected area.
Right.
Depending on where you're further up, even though this is surging as an ebb around here, this is okay. And then, by the way, this is where the old San Francisco Bay pilot's house is. This is where the pilot lived that went out and brought all the ships through the gate. So you got the red buoy out here, that's a marker, right? And we've got the beach here, and so forth, but it can be variety of water, dancing water, smooth water, whatever. I paddled across there with a friend in flat water, and I know I've been across there in really rough water. Okay, so now here's the culmination, it's drift management, all right? And remember that, it's managing drift. Drift is gonna exist, you can't mitigate it, but you can manage it, all right? Drift can be a friend, okay, or it can be a really difficult foe, all right? It can help you reach your destination, or you can put your whole group at risk, right? And it's a critical paddling skill, and we don't talk enough about it. I'm glad I'm having this opportunity, because I want you to think, how am I, as a rover, lead boat, sweep boat, whatever, managing the whole group? And that's why we get broken up, we get boats over there and all those things, because the guides are not managing drift, okay? So it requires awareness of what's going on in the water with the wind and so forth, and experience on the bay, and some skill in terms of selecting a ferry angle and so forth. And remember that there's managing and mitigating, you're never gonna eliminate it because it's there, all right? So drift is a primary factor, okay? Because it's, the thing is that all three of these things are causal, right? So they're causing drift, okay? They're predictive. I know where the tide is, I know where the wind is and so forth. And all these factors are completely out of our management control, right? Okay, but they're not drift itself. Drift is its own beast, okay? It's experiential. We move, our boats move, right? It's visible. You can see drift, you can see boats move, and it's manageable if you plan ahead, all right? So we're not going to talk about that, okay? So meet Dean, okay? These are the 4 factors in drift management. We have drift, we know our drift. We go through these. We deal with effort. How do we manage effort? The angle that we're addressing this, and navigation, so we know which way we're actually going. All right, let's talk about drift itself. So obviously, when a boat is pointed directly at its destination, drift is from the side, we're gonna angle across, right? And if we continue to point in the same direction, we'll end up somewhere else, right? Okay, so effort, obviously for fighting a current or a wind or something, there's a lot more effort involved. Can you find a better route where there's less effort? Maybe you go around, hug the coast, maybe you seek an eddy. On the circumnavigations of Angel Island, we'll see groups of guides that are going out there and they're, 50 yards off the coast in the middle of the channel versus coming and hugging all those coves along the side where you might even get a back eddy, right? That's poor drift management, okay? Poor effort management, all right? So taking a look at this is an example of, if you're paddling across with a whole group or whatever, you're aiming at destination, you're not going to get there, okay? Whereas if you apply an angle, so DEA, right, we're adjusting for the drift by cocking our angle into the drift, right? And that's called a ferry angle. And that may vary at different times along that path, but our goal is to keep an eye on our destination. We're going toward the destination. We don't have to point to the destination. That's really important, all right? So here's an example of a sideways drift, and we've got the boat. The red boat is if we're pointed directly at the destination, not going to be there. So we're adjusting our angle. And the closer we get, we can begin to straighten out and nail the target. All right. So again, that's back. Okay. So navigation, the N in the Dean, drift, effort, angle, and navigation. All right. We're talking about taking a range. Do you know what I'm talking about? Taking a range. Did we teach you in guide training?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's hard to illustrate.
Get to people.
Here's the deal. If you look at here, right? And if I'm going here, the back object is going with me, and the inside object is going away. So all the time when I'm on the water as a lead boat, I am taking a range forward. Am I making forward progress? Now, how do I take a range forward? I'm looking to my side. Am I making progress with the Point Stewart against the Richmond coast? Am I taking, Point Belvedere against the Sausalito Ridge? Okay. Am I making progress? And if I want to manage whether or not I'm drifting sideways, right? I look forward. Is Mount Tam and the buoy, am I going with it like that or not?
Yeah, or is it going one way or the other?
So Point Stewart, the buoy on Point Stewart and the actual point are
Yes.
two good ranges.
Yes.
When you're crossing.
Once you know what works for you as landmarks, it's great. Practice taking ranges and in both directions. Am I making forward progress? Am I drifting side to side? And here's the deal. You could be paddling your brains out with a group or alone, and you're in the middle of the water and you're not making any progress and you don't know it and you're using up all your energy, then you're exhausted. And what happens when you're tired and you're paddling less hard? You begin to drift. And if it's ebb, you begin to drift further and further and further and further and further. And there may be even rougher water, right? So be aware that knowing where you are, and again, on a full moon paddle, I'm out there at night with a bunch of people. I'm tracking it against TAM and so forth. I've been out there in heavy winds and I'm making sure, and I've paddled. I have taken groups through heavy situations that have come up and you go, no, not this way, turn this way and go all the way over here, hide behind the ridge, find somewhere else and accept the drift. Go with the drift around. But if you can get around to say, the cove off of Belvedere Point and then gather up, rest, whatever, and then say, okay, ready, around the point and then hug that coast, okay? So the trip leader is factoring in all these contingencies, but hopefully the trip leader is doing ranging all the time to make sure you're not just burning up your effort. So I'm gonna kind of fire through these, but these show you both directions. All right, so we met Dean. Now let's meet Eddie, okay? Eddie is your friend, okay? Eddies are great. Eddies are where there's calm water, generally, all right? Now, eddies can actually help you because they can be back currents. The water can be going the opposite direction. So you come, you're fighting it here, you go into an eddy, and you just kind of cruise up on the other side. Martinez, where I live, I can literally be fighting the current coming down. I can go over by the wetlands and I can just put away my paddle and drift all the way back up on my own. It's great. So, and in terms of all those slinky stops that I talk about, visit Eddie often. If you've got a group of inexperienced people, go see Eddie. And where are Eddie's? Tugboat Cove, STP Cove, all those places, Dumpy Bay, inside, so forth. All right, so, hang out with the group, rest up. Also, Eddies are great spots for environmental education, okay? Because there's less drift, easy to manage. Those slinky stops are also potential eel stops for environmental learning, okay? So where are you gonna find an eddy? You're gonna find an eddy behind things, all right? So you're gonna find an eddy behind a rock. You're gonna find it behind, like the point here, this is maybe Sea Glass Beach or something like that. And again, it can create a swirl effect, okay? Now, if it's a real strong eddy, crossing this line can be challenging because what's happening, you've got your boat pointed this way and all of a sudden, whoa, it goes off that way. So you've got to, skill and experience how to position your boat across there. And here you can see the same kind of thing. So, understand Dean, drift, effort, angle, and not navigation, and hang out with it, okay? He's your friend. All right, so how can you see the currents, okay? It all depends on where you are. Big deal. How do you tell the currents and the drift on Richardson Bay? Look at the sailboats. And what you'll find is, oh, what's an ebb? And they're all pointed, the ebb is going this way, the old boats are this way. What's the message?
It's not a.
Why are they all pointed to the ridge if it's an ebbing current? They're in transition.
Yeah.
They're gradually swinging around. The wind may be more influential than the ebb. Okay, and so you get the boats way up, which changes early, shifting around, where the boats further down. The water takes a while to ebb. You can look at the water piling up on one side of a pier or the ripples behind a pier, like at Spinnaker and so forth. I'm always watching for what's going on with the flow as a trip leader. I'm like, is it? I mean, I have interesting conversations about this. It's ebbing, it's flooding, it's ebbing, it's flooding. Okay, and the best way to do that is stop your boat. If you're a lead boat or a rover or a trip leader, the group is okay. I'll just stop. I don't care what the book says. I'm going backwards. Okay, you know what I mean? It's experiential, and that's what I'm trying to get across: is learn how to tell. It's deeply experiential. All right, so. These are out of order. Okay. Look at the eelgrass. This is really good on Tomales Bay. It's to watch the direction of the eelgrass. And you'll come around Isla Cove and parts of Angel Island, and you're dealing with a flood or an ebb. And you go over in that eddy, and it's pointed the opposite direction, or it's pointed directly out. So you can say, great, here I can begin to physically see the back current, all right? And look for water buildup on the objects. Okay, so here's a group of boats. We're leading that group apart. We got a lead boat and a sweep boat. They're never in a line, they're never in it. It's a good pod. So we're coming up here, and the next time, okay, so that the sweep boat is pointed in that original direction, right? And now they're beginning to curve, but they're following the lead boat. They're all turning too early, right? Because this boat should be pointed where this boat was, you know,
Yeah.
200 yards earlier, right? And how do you do that? The rovers do that, okay? The sweet boat really isn't that influential unless there's a bunch of boats around it. But you've got to think about how I, as a guide, am managing my local boats in the conditions that I'm at, knowing the destination, but knowing the lead boat may be, 50 yards or so further out and experiencing something different, okay? And so what happens here, because of the angles of the boats, they're drifting off the course line. The lead boat and the boat near it is going in, hitting it right on target, whereas those boats are drifting off to the side, okay? And that gets to be a management issue, all right? So, touch quickly on this.
Yeah, like,
Got some time, yeah. So, just quickly on towing, all right? Towing may help or hinder the towing effort. The boats, when they're out of alignment, creates a lot of drag on the towing boat. All right, the faster your boat you paddle, it pulls the other boat. You begin to counteract any sideways motion of the boats, but it means you're paddling harder, right? And then select the configuration that works best for the conditions. All right, so we got several configurations. Number one is the contact tow. This is a great one if you need to deal with another guide for some reason, or you've got a semi-cooperative double. You literally have the boat behind you, have them hold on to your boat right here, right across there. And if you look at the videos and stuff about contact tow, you'll have maybe a 2-foot
Yeah, how long
rope.
are they? 2 feet?
About well, you're clipping onto something up in
Yeah.
front, literally running across you, clip onto there, and they're right behind you, okay? And you're paddling along. You want it out of your paddle sweep, but right there. Second is an inline tow. We started out at EBTC with 50-foot tow lines.
Yeah.
Right? Way the hell out there. In my opinion, this should be, like clip here or whatever, 5 feet and maybe 10 feet. 15
We're
feet.
gonna have shortened tow ropes, especially for sit-on-top trips,
Yes.
and
Right.
slightly shorter ones
Mhm.
for.
Even 25 feet.
Yeah, 25.
It really gets to be a problem. So what you can do if you have a tow rope, you can put an intermediate loop on it that you can put, you can clip in close, clip in further back, all right? The other thing and then we've got the inline tow with several boats, right? Put it in where, this is like a train going on the track, big engine, secondary engine, so forth. But what's the issue with this kind of tow?
Depends what the person in the middle is doing, because, well, I guess that's they're two, the boat being towed is in the back, right?
Right.
Oh.
Yeah, that
Oh,
they're
yeah,
all.
I'm sorry, you're going to the right?
This is the tow, these are towers
These
and
are
this
the
is the
towers,
towing, okay?
And what's the question again?
The question is, what's wrong with this configuration? Okay, and I'll answer that because of time. If I need to pull that boat, that's a drag, that's gonna be hard to do. If this is a configuration with this, I say, hey, I need you particular guide, rather, I wanna leave this boat because they're strong, this person's helping out. I've got to do a whole bunch of crap to get that boat loose, right? Whereas a veto, I can just break off, right? I'm pulling, balancing the load, one will pull tight, the other will pull tight. So veto is very useful, particularly when there's a side loading of the drift, okay? So, the longer you get in a span like that, the further back the boat, they're gonna be influenced by, if you got 2 25-foot or 30-foot lines, that could form an arc, okay, from sideways. Whereas a veto, in effect, what you're doing is this boat is pulling and this boat is keeping that boat in line, okay?
So given that we usually have like several guides on a trip, when would it be appropriate to do a veto? Because I feel like we usually have.
Your
enough people
choice.
To
I'm not gonna get into
It's
it.
an interesting
I
one.
don't think we've ever done that.
I have never done a veto ever in my 40 years of paddling. So I've never used a veto. I'm not saying it's not a good technique. I just haven't done it. I have towed in series and it can create an issue where you have alignment like that. Generally, I've just done one-on-one tow.
And so
Yeah.
where I've used this is literally in Raccoon Strait, where I've got a boat back here that really needs help, but the current is really pulling that boat back and tugging on the back of that boat, causing it a much more effort that way. Whereas I can keep my angle maybe a little bit more, and I'm heading in the direction I'm pulling them, but I'm also keeping that nose closer to in line. And again, maybe I'm helping out, maybe I get it so far and I go, great, I'm exhausted. I need to pull, I'm needed somewhere else. I can pull, I can just drop back and clip and I'm gone, right? Very useful. All right, so this is obvious, you know, you're paddling against a drift, it's gonna be a lot of effort. So how do you deal with that? Maybe find a calmer area, get yourself out of the wind, get yourself in a current. The other part though is if you're paddling with the drift, what can happen is it's carrying you forward. If you're not paddling slightly faster than the drift, you're ending up with slack in that line and you're going, you know, tug, 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 right? And again, they can begin to drift because they're kind of free flowing with the water. So you've got to maintain a speed that theoretically keeps some tension on that line, all right?
Depending on the reason for towing, like if you're towing just because a boat is slow, if you're towing because someone's sick, they're not gonna be helping you.
Right.
But if you're towing because you have a slow boat, I always say, I need your help, I really do, and cheerlead me, you know, and just, it keeps everybody engaged. And I think that that's super important, so you don't get wasted in the trip.
Okay, so here we're going to deal with case studies. Okay, so we're going to watch this video quickly. Let's see if we do that. Do this. This is a fascinating video, very short. Watch the red through Raccoon Strait. Okay. Notice the imbalance. North side stronger than south side of Golden Gate. Notice Alcatraz. Currents right here where I was talking about. Off of Angel Island, open water right there. Calm water here. This is Alcatraz again, coming up. And I may cut this short just for time, but this is fascinating to watch it go up along the Berkeley coast. There we go, look at that. Isn't that interesting how it builds right there, okay? So we're coming around here, or we're going up here, whatever. That's a treacherous area, right there, around, we're coming into Camp Reynolds.
Does anyone know how deep it is in Raccoon Strait? Like say in the deepest part of Raccoon Strait?
200 feet?
About 140.
Yeah.
Pretty dramatic in that.
Actually, you know what, I'm gonna stop this because they're interesting. It takes you further up the coast. You can watch this, the link is in the,
Mark,
yes.
so there's places I think I looked at on the internet where you can actually have those, go and see those lines, you know?
It's coming up.
Oh, sorry.
Yes, that's fine. Okay, so that was the video. So now we're gonna do case studies. We're gonna fire right through this. These are screen captures of the app that showed you the surface currents verified by Dr. Doug, who's an oceanographer, PhD. Now watch this. This is this profile of a swirl on the bay. All right, so we're coming here. Watch that swirl coming up from the middle of the bay outside the gate, wrapping itself right across the front of Sea Glass Beach. Notice that swirl, right? Got boats further out. They're going this way. Boats coming up here. Okay, and that swirl then proceeds across the mouth of Richardson Bay, and then comes up around where we hang out to cross, and then in effect dissipates after that. Notice this. We're here. We're going to go to Angel Island. What do we have? Remember I told you about the green buoy and how wicked this can be? Wicked, potentially, okay? These are all green, so they're lightweight water. They will change color in some of these. Okay, let's go through this one case study. Okay, watch this. I've correlated this with time and tide, all right? So you can follow this. You know, this is 1 hour after max ebb, okay? Can you predict what's going on? It's swirly, right? We've got ebbing water here, we've got flooding water there, we've got intensity off of there, and we've got all this water coming in here. And why do we have water coming into Richardson Bay after a max ebb? Because Richardson Bay is a potential source of an eddy. We've got water wrapping around here, okay? So you can see that water coming in here, and this is ebbing in the north side. In my experience, I would generally consider that the north side always changes current before the southern side. So if it says, hey, it's flooding at the gate, the other side is most likely still ebbing, all right? So let's follow this around. Here, look at that treacherous red spot. Here, mixed currents, confused water, those kind of things. 1 hour after max ebb, it's not flows straight through Raccoon Strait. Let's take a look at this one, okay? So look at this. This is correlated with the timing. We're coming up on low tide, right? I've got water pouring into Richardson Bay. There's my pointer. I've got water flowing out of the gate. That's really strange, okay? Look at that, totally confused water, right there at Belvedere Point, right? Have water coming in multiple directions at low tide. Water coming here, strong water coming here. Remember I talked about the turbulence here? The slack is coming up, and we'll see that. Okay, here comes low slack, right? Is it heading straight out? Is it pointing in one direction? It is, but it's not what you think. It's not going upstream or downstream, it's going sideways, okay? So here's sometime after low tide and coming along here. So look at that, totally confused water, mid-tide and rising, all right? So again, the confluence of fresh water and seawater, okay? And then max flood. How come I got water going out at max flood? These are all arrows pointing downward. Huh? Remember I said localized, experiential. This is what the chart says. This is reality, okay? So following this along, it's coming up on peak high tide, the lower of the two high tides. I got water heading out. Okay? So in my opinion, study these, get a sense of what's going on. Learn and watch, predict in advance with the charts, experience it in real time, and write that down in your mental logbook. I was there at ebb in Raccoon Straits. What was the water like? Okay, was it a high ebb, low ebb, whatever, those kind of things. So I'm just going to fire through these, but this is a timeline all the way through. You can see on the left, following it through. Now, just a quick note on coastal safety. Obviously, we're talking about ferry wakes. Ferry wakes can intensify the water on the beach. This is water coming in from ferry wake on Camp Reynolds. So if you've got all the boats staged, sweeps the boats up, causes them to get cockeyed, even broach on the launch, right? Whereas, we all think of it as calm. And these waves, obviously, can come 20 minutes, half an hour after the boats go by, right? Okay, oops. Also then be aware of, they're not rip tides, they're rip currents. And this goes across the board. And I was on Goat Beach where a father and a little kid drowned a couple of years ago because they got caught in a rip and he went in to save the kid. Okay, you can see these currents if you're aware of them. They're pulling out, okay, but they dissipate and they can actually wrap around. So you always want to, if you're caught in this, swim sideways. And when we talk about currents and rip currents, I was telling a couple of people before the thing. When we're on the bay, we sometimes guides will talk about, oh, be careful, you don't want to get swept out from the Farallones, right? True story. A new foil boarder, experienced surfer, experienced windsurfer and everything else, fell off her board, got sucked out the gate, spent all night out in the open water on her board before the tide changed, brought her back in and had to swim into one of the beaches along the side. It happens all the time with those people that cut across the bay. If you think about our groups, about cut across the gate, our groups are further up, but we take longer to pull off our rescues. And if shit happens, don't put yourself in that position, okay? Be prepared. All right, so here's examples of the current, the smooth water going up. Yeah, just what you need to know, right? Okay. And then sneaker waves. Obviously, don't turn your back on the waves. Kids don't understand that. People from out of the area don't understand it. If you're on the beach, I make it a point to watch. If the adults aren't watching the kids, I'll politely say, I'm assuming you're aware of the potential risks here. I don't want to insult them by saying, hey, whatever. But I've had many times, oh, I didn't know, and well, you know, you might save a life. Okay, so that's it. I've got a list of resources here. There's your high tides, and then, yeah, that's actually, I've got more apps now than that. That's my layout.
I wanted to say something about tides, and then we do have to cover time, so I'll share your Tamala section at guide
Yes,
training,
yes.
but I've got to
Yes.
the TL training.
So I've got some shots of, Toronto Spain and stuff, but yeah, we're done.
Cool.
Okay.
I wanted to share a point about
Yeah, sure,
the
go for
tides and tags app that
Yeah.
the ones you'll often use for these trips. You know, there's a Corps of Engineers dock in Sausalito, which is really good for those big trips. There are both tide and current stations for San Francisco Bay, so you can use that to look at those two pieces of how they interact, and that's really useful for trips at different points. For Tamales Bay, unfortunately, there's not a really good current station, so you have to look at Marshall and Inverness, and then use what Mark was saying about tide lags current to figure out when that slack tide time is gonna be. So that's my little piece of market. Thank you for all of your input.
We did it right on time. Let me just open it up to questions or comments, or not more stories, but any question? Did this make sense? Do you have a different perspective on this side or anything, you know, comments? And this will be available wherever you want to post it.
Yeah, we'll share it, yeah.
But like I said, I personally, as soon as I started guiding, I realized I needed to be a student of the day. And the more I got into it, the more I really kind of wanted to document it. I did some of this from my own knowledge, all the screen captures. And I thought, all right, you know, it'd be interesting to share with people's perspectives. So, thank you all for
I
coming.
wanna share, Mark, thank you, Mark. I wanna share one comment. When we first started the kayak program, there was a man by the name of Paul Kaufman, we called him the old man of the bay. He was probably the first kayaker since the Aleutians were in San Francisco Bay. And he was a Union psychoanalyst and had Hodgkin's disease. And he lived right on the Marina Green here. And Bob Licht and I escorted him on his 500 trip out the Golden Gate. He's a super weak guy, but he was a student of the tides and currents. And he always said, so this is one thing about, come and talk to new guides. He'd kind of whisper, and then he had to use it but he said the wise paddler, the tide chart, and the current chart, and decides their destination. The unwise paddler decides where they're gonna go and then looks at the tide chart. Etc. We often, you know, we don't have necessarily choice. The group arrives and we have to go to a destination, but choosing that destination wisely involves understanding the tides and currents. So I'll never forget his words of wisdom.
You know, and just in terms of, again, experience, when we opened the place at the whole scene in Tamales Bay, it wasn't the first group that tried to get to Marshall Beach. It wasn't the second group. It took 3 attempts to get a group to Marshall Island or Marshall Beach because of the winds and the currents, time of day and everything else. The other groups got up and then they left. Tamales Bay, one point I'll make, if you go out there, it's a potentially very dangerous place.
Yes. Recently, several people have died out there.
Yeah.
Well, there was a death.
I really want to do horror stories of Tamales, but I have to cut it off. I'm gonna take TL trainees upstairs for just a quick couple minutes to talk about this weekend. Everybody else, thank you for coming. If you don't mind helping us fold these tables up and put them in that corner. And Mark will share this. I'll get the video too.
Good. See you soon.
Where could the